Welcome back to another episode of The Journey. Auburn, welcome back to the show.
Glad to be back.
How many weeks have you missed now?
Oh, let's see.
Because we recorded a bonus episode last week without you too.
Probably, I don't know, 4 maybe.
Thursday, there was a little shade between me and Chase about you always rat-mouthing him for not being here and you hadn't been here.
I was at work though.
Well, when you were at camp, yeah.
I only missed one podcast for vacation. So
Okay.
I think that's null and void.
Okay. Well, we'll see.
Check the timestamps.
I don't care that much.
Run the credits.
Run the credits. All right. So it's August. Brother Ray's back. Who knows what we're going to be assigned tomorrow from the sabbatical. So how are y'all feeling?
Feeling good. Glad he's back.
And, by the time this airs, we'll be well into August. So
Yeah, we're a few weeks into August when
Yeah.
those that are watching or listening to this. So if you see us in church or see us at the office in any way and we look different than we normally do, you know that, it's been an interesting few weeks.
We're now 3 episodes ahead with our bonus episode.
Yeah,
With,
y'all missed that episode. I was pretty shook in a couple of different ways. Of course,
Bonus episode. Who was that?
Samantha Tedder and Kaylee Nelson. They came Thursday to discuss their journeyman program.
With you two? Were you here?
I wasn't here.
Just you?
me and
I was here.
Oh.
See, while you take yourself out of episodes, Broxton takes me out of episodes.
Yeah, I know. How rude.
All right. Well,
it was a good episode though.
you won't sit out the episode with James. Chase has already volunteered to do that.
Okay.
Let's go.
Redemption.
So then we'll be like a month ahead.
If we get a few of the Student Awesome August guys, we'll be, if we continue to record normally on Monday, but I was going to ask y'all about that if y'all wanted to record next Monday morning and Monday afternoon or not. Or do y'all just want the episode with James to be what we record next week?
I'll be out the next Monday after that. So
Let's just double it up.
He's taking himself out again.
taking myself out. I will be on vacation. So
Where y'all
Yeah.
going?
Charleston.
Ooh. Going back to Hyman's?
You betcha.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah, that's number 1 on the
Yeah,
agenda.
Lance put me on.
Yeah. We had a visitor, as a matter of fact, in service yesterday that was from Charleston.
Okay.
Yeah. So we had some common conversation.
Nice.
I say we double it up.
Okay.
Just keep going.
You go with that, Neil? Can you keep track of everything? 100%. Okay. All right. Well, it might not even be a factor if we can't get the other Student Awesome August speakers. That's Auburn's task, is to line them up.
All right.
Well, I didn't know about that task until like the end of last week. So we're missing out on our speaker tonight, which he would be good.
He would be.
He would be good.
Who was that?
Stacy Stafford.
Never heard him speak.
Yeah, he's a very good speaker.
So
Daughter's a very good basketball player.
Yeah, she was.
Really good.
if Auburn's job is to line that up, then Broxton, it's your job to line up the next journey on the road with Miss Kathy.
But hold on, like, I mean, how do we know OG's not going to want the big awesome August speakers to do one?
Well, it was kind of my plan to talk to him. I thought I would run into him getting Sweet A coffee this morning, and I didn't. But I was just going to mention
He was up there early. He was getting after it.
I was going to mention, hey, we're not doing anything today, but next week, Black Stallion's going to be here.
We could like alternate.
We're going to record something with him. If you want to know, basically, politely, if you want to record anything, we need to know now so that we don't double book.
Who's next week in Big Church?
Mac
Brunson.
Brunson. But see, with them, that kind of depends on like when they get here. Like Phil Waldrop's supposed to be here early enough to go eat before the service tonight, so that's out of the question.
Oh, going to eat before?
Mm-hmm. He's a pre-meal speaker
What time?
person.
4:30, I think.
Dang, I was really hoping to go eat dinner, but I guess not.
But then like the other guys normally just get here in enough time to just hang out with Ray in his office. Yeah. So,
well, we might. I'll see what I can do.
We can just be sitting in Ray's office
like
with all the camera equipment.
like if we take James this week or next week, and we give Ray the bigger speaker the next week, then the next week we got Dean and Sarah coming, so he would be willing to.
So that would be is that Fred Luter the third week?
17th.
Yeah, that would be Fred Luter, wouldn't it?
That would be fun. You just see about getting Ray and Fred.
Typically, Fred flies in with 11 seconds to spare.
You ain't lying.
Now, it's not his fault. I mean, usually it's weather or something, and you know how flights are, but that's typically how it's been working with him.
Yeah, that would be cool if we could at least maybe work out Fred, and then you could do Dean.
Or Dustin. I mean, Dustin will be here the
Dean's
17th.
the same week. Oh, Dustin's here the 17th.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would like to have Dustin though.
Well, then we can just.
You might have to do like a shorter version, just, hey, we got 30 minutes with Dustin, 30 minutes with Fred, depending on time frame or something like that.
Or what if you develop like a few questions, like, 3 to 5 questions, and you just run through them?
What if none of this happens and none of them can do it and Black Stallion's the only guest that we get to have all month?
Oh, I bet we can lock down Dustin. I'm sure he'll come in the night before or that morning. He'll probably spend the night.
It'll be fine.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on. Anybody got any other topics, or should we go with, we should let Lance introduce what he sent us a couple weeks ago?
I say go for it, Lance.
Okay. Every once in a while, you come across something that you kind of file away. And I sent this to you guys 2 or 3 weeks ago from Josh Howerton. And I'll just read what he posted on X, and then we can comment as we see fit. Pastors. An enormous number of pastors, and especially professors, are very, very out of touch with normal people and families, especially blue-collar people. So, to reach and disciple those people, you're going to need to do some things that pastoral world finds cringe, not theologically, but in things like style, tone, often emphasis, and you will be chattered about. There will be a couple of moments when you'll have to decide which matters more, being in the inside circle of pastoral world or actually reaching and discipling real people with real jobs and real sins and real problems in a real culture. Charles Spurgeon summarized this dynamic well when he was viciously attacked by other pastors and newspapers for his jokes in the pulpit, his, quote, vulgar tone, unquote, and his sort of blue-collar speech. To which he said, quote, I am perhaps vulgar, but it is not intentional, save that I must and will make the people listen. My firm conviction is that we have had quite enough polite preachers, and many require change. God has owned among the most degraded and offcasts. Let others serve their clan. These are mine, and to them I must keep. Thoughts?
Well, let's just start with you. Why did it stick out so much to you?
Because I think I can see both sides of his argument. I think that when you are trying to unpack a scripture or a passage to reveal a deep truth, it's very easy to think academically. It's very easy to think preacherese. And I think there's an easy tendency to make it a very academic exercise from the pulpit. So on one hand, I could see where, to use Josh's term, blue-collar people in the congregation may be like, I don't even know what those words mean. So I can see his point from that standpoint. On the other hand, I think it also gives a license to people who just want to shock from the pulpit and want to make waves with their own words. And so you can see the good and the bad of what he's saying. I mean, I think maybe we can have a tendency to talk over people that we need to reach, but I can also see that being abused and people just trying to get attention for shock value. So those were my thoughts.
Do you think that, let's just kind of take, I don't know, maybe the last, let's just say maybe from the, 1950s to the 2000s to the 2000s to now, do you think from the earlier time period, you had pastors who, I don't want to say were unapproachable, but in a sense were like, I have to look this way and act this way and say things this way. And I think you've seen a shift to some nowadays that it's like, I don't have to look a certain way or sound a certain way, but there's this negative side to that to where maybe they're not viewed in a way in which they should be. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of goes along with that. You kind of see this side of people nowadays where they're almost too friendly, too open to where, whatever their member may be dealing with may be brushed off in a way that in the past would have been looked at much more harshly.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a long time, everybody pretty much conformed to the same style.
Right.
They dressed the same. They had the same haircut. They said the same things the same way all the time. And then I think you had a reaction to that where people started to operate outside of that.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when that happens, then you have people operate too far outside of that.
Yeah.
And it's a negative. But yeah, I mean, I think that's probably what we've seen over the past few years.
Well, the day that, Spurgeon is writing what he wrote that you read, the reality of like understanding and knowing what other people were like was really slim. I mean, like we live in a world today where it's like, this vast difference of cultures is understood at the fingertips of all of us because of our phones. So like the sphere of influence in regards to like, this is how this preacher does it, or this is how that preacher does it, like is seen so much more today than it has ever been. So I think, this, back in the day when people had the same haircut and everything, it was like, this is all we know. This is what everybody in the town looks like. This is what everybody in the town thinks. And this is how they dress. And this is what they like. Well, it's because all you knew was your town. All you knew was your, where you were, unless you traveled and did some things, which I'm assuming obviously there was probably some of that too. But like right now for us, you can pull up any of these guys on YouTube and watch a sermon and see the difference in how they dress or speak or teach and interact with people even in that way. And so I think there's a big difference in just this idea of like where people are and what they see right now. And so his point about being out of touch with normal people, it's trying to navigate how would you define normal people? And I think that's a thing to really think about. And I understand there's a great deal of importance in being relatable to anyone to be able to come in. And then you got the pull, though, of being relatable to your people, your context. Because, I mean, at what point, as far as, yes, we want people to come to church and we want to get them here. But if we do something, this is a struggle, goes back to some of the stuff I've talked about recently before. If you do so much to get people in the door that you lose the people that are already in the door because of the way you're doing what you're doing to get the people that are outside the door, is that right or is that wrong? Mm-hmm. Because you're reaching new folks, but if you do something that the people that are already there would say they don't like or and they leave, then is that a right thing or is that a wrong thing? Is that a problem with the people that left, or is that a problem with what you're trying to do?
That's interesting because you have so people that you reach in your church. I think there's really only two ways that you essentially are reaching new people, and that is either your church is essentially reaching them due to like the programming that you have, the look of things, or the search for truth, which is what Brother Ray talked about yesterday, the idea of truth and searching the truth. And you see those who are searching for a program or an aesthetic or whatever this looks like, you see down the road, they realize at some point that runs out. And it's like, well, I'm not experiencing my walk with Christ the way I did when we first got here because all these things have changed. But in reality, that's what got you there. Whereas you see the ones who are, I would say, to some extent, more faithful at times in terms of depth, they're finding a place based on what are the words we're singing? Are they true? What are the words that are being taught? Are they true? Are our kids being taught the truth? Are, and so on and so forth. And you see that lasting even more. And I think there's got to be somewhere in between that has been missed. And I don't know how because obviously, like, you don't want everything to be focused on a program or an event or this is how we get you there. You want it ultimately to be the truth that keeps them there. But how do you merge the two? And what does that really look like? Because for so many years, like you're saying, like the scope of, like, 30 years ago, let's just say you went to this church and you went to another church, you went to another church. Like, you went to that church and that's where you went because you grew up there. That's where your family was. That's all you knew. And it wasn't like, oh, well, we had this pastor come for revival and he was great, but this is our church, whereas like nowadays somebody comes to your church to speak, and albeit, let's say they're in the neighborhood. Most of the time that's not the case, but oh, well, such and such from, let's just use First Baptist, for example, say their pastor came and spoke. Well, then, you might have people that, oh, I really like him, so let's just go. The idea of kind of loyalty is lost in some of that.
Well, and now here's this guy from Dallas.
Yeah.
We know how he preaches. And, he's got some stuff to say too. So yeah, that's a different dynamic.
And we just pull him up on the TV now.
Right.
Like we don't go to church. Like
exactly.
It's weird. It's weird.
I think I don't know exactly what he's trying to say, but when he uses the term blue collar people, then, I can easily understand why, okay, if I'm crafting a message and I want to reach a more blue collar group of people, okay, let me see if I can figure out some analogies that hit where they're living.
Yeah.
That's what I think of. But I also think he's talking about something more. I think he's talking about, you've got to loosen up your language and you've got to talk the way that they talk, and it's not going to resonate with them if you don't get where they are. And that's dangerous to me, I think. I think that you wind up taking too many liberties that may not end up having the right result or outcome when you go down that road. So on one hand, I can sit there and go, yeah, I could certainly see where there's a segment that may not be being reached. On the other hand, I can say, you know what? I think you can go down that road too far. And like you said, it's kind of finding that happy medium.
So what do you think is that fine line between really tailoring something to the average person's understanding versus, and I guess a lot of it is in the application side of, this might be a little.
I know. I don't know the line. I think the name that I always think of when I hear this is Mark Driscoll.
Your buddy.
We're not buddies. I've never met him.
And I think that when Mark,
he'd be a good podcast guest.
he would, wouldn't he?
We'd have some shorts for sure.
And And a lot of what he preached, he was trying to reach a certain demographic.
Yeah.
The grunge element of the Northwest. And he preached specifically in that tone to shake them up. And I think there was a lot of positive that came out of that. But I also can easily see where it went to his head. He went too far. He lost control of himself and wound up losing his entire ministry practically overnight. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I say you got to be careful with that, because it can be very successful, but it can also be very damaging.
Yeah. And for him, it wasn't that necessarily what he was saying at times was wrong per se. It was the way in which he said it that was that line. You're right. And
it's so intoxicating because you get all this attention and you see your ministry growing, you see your church growing, and you shake things up and get a name for yourself, and your church gets a name for itself, and there's growth and things are happening. And then all of a sudden, maybe you just preach a series of sermons where you don't go there.
Yeah.
Well, they're not talking about you as much.
Right.
And maybe growth has plateaued a little bit, and you sit there going, okay, next week I'm going to really have to blow it out.
Yeah.
And then you start doing something as a gimmick or as an attention getter, and it starts building on itself, and you feel like you've got to go out there every week and say something like that, and you can't build a ministry that way.
I think the thing that comes to mind when I've listened to the discussion is like, early on we had our conversation, or a couple conversations about like using language and stuff. We like to pick on Sean Ryan on this show. Chase is his new biggest fan.
Is that the Fear Factor guy?
Him too. But
I'm not his biggest fan.
It's a joke. It's a joke.
Man's pressed because he's already finished the Reaper episode.
He needs to state that for the audience.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm not Sean Ryan's biggest fan. I do enjoy listening.
He loves his shoes, though.
I do enjoy listening to the military podcast guests that he has. Those have been very enjoyable.
Are you a big Rob O'Neill fan?
I don't know who that is.
I don't either. So,
Broxton, you know who that is?
I do.
Who is it?
I know who he claims to be, but I've heard,
Pocahontas.
No. He claims to have killed Osama bin Laden, but everybody else is like, no, dude.
Yeah, I mean, there's other guys that have been on Sean Ryan's show that
they're like, this dude's full of it.
Interesting.
Well, maybe I haven't gotten to those.
You need to jump off in that conspiracy.
Please don't jump off in any conspiracies. We've got enough.
Anyways.
So what I was saying is the thing that comes to mind is, and I don't feel like I have to do this as much, thankfully, because I'm not in a pastoral role in that sense that I don't know. It's just different. We've talked about how like I view my role as different than the roles y'all are in. Definitely the role that Brother Ray's in. But to me, it's just fine line of like, you do have to be approachable and relatable to people. Mm-hmm. Because if you're, like the analogy of the ivory tower, okay, if people view you as being and operating in an ivory tower, then you don't care what we think. You have no idea what we go through. So why would I listen to you? So you do have to be like approachable to people, but also I don't know how to balance that and square that with like, okay, the man of God in Scripture, whether it is, in the Old Testament, it was a prophetic figure. In the New Testament, it's, a pastor or overseer. Like you're literally supposed to be different. You're supposed to be set apart because it's not that everybody's not a minister of the gospel, but being in a ministry leadership role that we are in, there are supposed to be differences. So like, again, I mean, the question just continues to be, what is the line? Mm-hmm. Like, do you as the man of God, there are some sacrifices you make in your life that I'm not going to be around certain things because of the perception that it gives. And even like, Paul talks about being above reproach in front of people. So I don't know. I mean, that's just a lot to think about. And I think I don't know how to square that with what he's saying. And he might not be saying what we think he's saying. And you never know unless you can have somebody across the table and talk to him.
So you're going to effort Josh Howerton to be on the podcast?
Yeah, maybe email him because none of my emails really worked out.
No, but I know where you're going because I think probably what Josh would say is that, look, I'm trying to reach a group of people, and I may step across a line a couple of times. I don't mean to, but I may, which is basically what he quoted Spurgeon as saying. I don't mean to be what they're saying I am, but I'm going to reach people. It's just that line, and we've got Fred Luter coming in a couple of weeks. He began preaching by being a street preacher in New Orleans. He had 7 seconds to get somebody's attention. He's probably not going to be able to do that if he gets on a street corner and says, friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ear. You know, he's going to end up having to,
That's pretty good.
He's going to end up having to preach the way that he had to preach. So, but even, and maybe if we can get him on, it'd be a great question.
That would be a great question.
Because
write that down.
We would sit here as a Ridgecrest congregation and we would say, Fred is way in a category all by himself when he preaches. But Fred would probably say, I'm preaching to the folks at Ridgecrest. I probably have to preach a little bit differently than I would at my former now church in New Orleans. It would be interesting to ask him.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned there's clearly got to be a difference. Like, people need to look in a role and see a difference, but they don't need to see somebody that's untouchable, because the reality is that, I mean, in the day and time today where so much is out there, so much is seen, so much is heard, so much is, viewed, like, people realize that nobody's perfect. Yeah. And so if a person sees a pastor and sees a difference in them, but sees also that they're just as real as the normal person sitting in the congregation, then that is what I think has to be viewed. And I even think you asked the question, like, where's the line? I really think in some ways the line is dependent upon the person, because, Josh Howerton can do possibly some things that I might not can do or should do, just depending on my personality or depending on, my struggles and different things that I need to be careful with. He might not have that. So that line might be a little different for him. He can be around some people or say some things or in certain ways that would come across and people just know that that's just who he is and he's different. But if I said it or if I was around those people, it might, hit different or make me respond different. So I think the important thing, though, is our world today does want to see truth. We've already talked about that, but they want to see truth also through the lens of people that are being authentic. Mm-hmm. And I talked a little bit about this last night with our leaders, just the reminder that, people can see, I believe in today's world, and I say it all the time, people can see straight through your being real or fake more today than they've ever been able to see. So, in your neighborhood, in your workplaces, in your interactions with your, ballparks, wherever you are, people need to see that real, follower of Christ, not untouchable, not perfect, but there is a difference in you and difference in us, but, someone that they can relate with and have a conversation with possibly about it. So,
yeah, I think what you said about how it goes from person to person, I think about Pastor Ray, and he shows vulnerability in the pulpit rarely. He'll get personal and talk about those moments, but when he goes there, they're powerful because it's not constant. And those moments, you remember them because they don't come every week. Whereas I don't know. I don't listen to him every week, but I would say someone who probably is more vulnerable and more what you're talking about on a more regular basis is probably somebody like an Ed Newton, who I think probably is a little bit more every week, but it works for him because he's familiar with his people and probably relates to them that way, and they relate to him that way. But I think both work effectively. And I don't know if that's the same as what Josh is talking about, because I gathered from a lot of what Josh was saying is that you should go in a direction that you're going to get pastoral world to criticize you on, and maybe sometimes that's necessary, but that's a different category than what I think you and I are talking about.
Do you think, because really the last, I would say really the last 6 months, like Brother Ray has shared some more personal stories in either like a serious or like a more joking way. And you really have gotten to see like his personality on display a lot more. Do you think, like, you guys are older, so like when we were growing up, I'm not going to speak for you, but I'll speak for myself. Like it was just like Brother Ray was like this like figurehead kind of person, where you interacted, but like you really didn't see his personality or his personal side. And I think some of that is probably just like the different churches he was in, and that was kind of what he saw and how not that those people weren't respected or personable, but just the difference in how people are viewed at times. Would y'all say that, I think we would all say we've seen kind of a shift in that in later years, but early on, would y'all say y'all saw that? Like in his early 2000s, mid 2000s, that personal side really on display like it is now?
Probably not from the pulpit.
Yeah.
You're preaching to 1,000 people, and I think he had to get comfortable with us, and we had to get comfortable with him. And since that happened, I think you've seen more of that, like you just said. But he started a men's group pretty early on after he was here, and I was a part of that because I wanted to get to know him a little bit better. Yeah. And the smaller your group gets,
right,
usually the more intimate you are, and you could really get to know your pastor pretty well that way.
Yeah, I remember the first time I saw Brother Ray in shorts, and I was like, what is
He's got legs.
I was like,
can pastors do that?
I was like, what is this? Because it's like you always saw him in like really khakis or
khakis or a suit.
Yeah. And so it was like, man. So
you saw him good in those glasses too.
So yes, I just remember seeing Brother Ray for the first time in shorts. Man, so giving me a hard time.
You were like,
today.
Dang, can he do that? Mom, can he do that?
So, but it's just a different, different setting, but it just, again, it is, he is just a normal person, and he does a really good job, I think, with boundaries and being wise about that. And he takes all that very seriously. And, and I think some of the reality, some of the stuff that we're talking about here, one of the things to me that shows there's fruit in these things happening is like someone thinking through the idea, like who would feel comfortable showing up to worship at Ridgecrest.
Yeah.
And like, thinking about that, and we've had different walks of life that have shown up here, and some have felt comfortable, some haven't. And I think it's not necessarily, I feel like anybody can really come and show up, and at the end of the day, our people do a really good job of welcoming folks. And so some people have stuck with that, some people haven't, but I think that's a way to kind of tell. And I think that's, comes from top down of just people being willing to be open and sharing. And I think it is hard. We've talked about this a little bit before. It is hard in a preaching setting. You got to really think about what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. And there's a lot to the meat of the text that you do. That is, if you're a nerd that likes that stuff, bringing out the Greek and all that is like an exciting thing. And there's people in the room that do connect with that. But then there's people in the room that goes right over their head. Yeah. it's just this balance of trying to navigate. And he's even said it before, there's illustrations or stories he might share in the first service that he doesn't share in the second service, or things that a way you might say something to a crowd. If I was teaching teenagers, that would be different than it would be, So I think it has a lot to do with seeing your audience, and I think being open to that. And I think one of the biggest things for this quote to me that's important is just, again, being different but not untouchable, and thinking about the people that are around us and who God's put in our path, and making sure that we're relatable to them, but there's a difference in us.
You brought up Ed Newton, and I really wish that we could just get him on the show, because this is he's like exhibit A of this, because he came from our world and is now in a different world as a senior pastor. And I mean, Chase's dilemma about his shoes is like nothing compared to the change in Ed. Mm-hmm. And I just want to.
Yeah, he went from Vans to J's.
I would just like to talk about that. And I don't know.
He even went, it'd be interesting, because he went from like surfer dude, Vans,
he went from like skateboard,
long hair. Then he went to like buttoned up, like suit. I mean, it was still it wasn't like an old man suit, but it was like,
it was tapered, but
when he came to Ridgecrest in 2019 for Awesome August, the man wore, like a skinny fit suit, top button, buttoned, all that kind of stuff. But now I don't know that he would wear that.
I don't know that he would either. And he has said, and I've heard him say it, like, he just wasn't himself. Mm-hmm. And that's the interesting thing that comes to this too. It's like, he wasn't himself. He got called to be the pastor of Community Bible Church, San Antonio, Texas, where a man, dressed a certain way. There was a certain crowd, and it was like, and this goes to my shoe struggle. I mean, it's like, this is what I need to be.
Yeah.
And like within 2 to 3 years of it, he was just, worn slap out, because he was constantly anxious and nervous and stressed about thinking about trying to fit all this stuff. And it was like, I don't know the full detail, and I'd be interested to hear, him talk about it more probably, but it's like he hit a point where it's like, this is not me. Why am I trying to be somebody I'm not? And he was, there was influence that he was having, but it was internally causing him a great deal of struggles. And so that's when he finally came to a point where it was like, look, I hadn't seen him wear a suit in years.
Yeah.
And a lot has changed, but it's just, that's the thing that going back to this a little bit too, to me, is the idea of like being yourself and being okay with that.
And I think, and we obviously, practically all the conversation has been about how we see someone behind the pulpit relating to a congregation, but also wonder from a congregate standpoint what they see. Because it's more on me than anything, but when I was growing up, it was like it was very hard for me to relate to somebody that wore a tie, because that to me, they existed in a completely different world than I did. And it was always, it wasn't that I just completely turned somebody off, but I was like, yeah, that's not me at all. And so they're trying to reach a completely different group of people, but I spiritually matured, I hope, along the way, and I don't see it that way anymore. But I do wonder what the average congregate sees from the pulpit, not just on what we wear, but what we say, and if there's a relational gap there, because it would be interesting to poll the congregation and see what they perceive.
Yeah, like how much would wearing a coat to preach in first service truly affect who's gonna just tune out right away?
Yeah,
it's very interesting to think about.
Yeah.
I do think what's interesting, though, with these guys that we've mentioned, these names between Josh Howerton and Ed Newton, at least from my perspective, and I haven't watched as much Josh Howerton, but I look, and what I have seen between both of them is there's a comfort level in the pulpit that they are just who they are. And you got to be okay with that if you're going to be the congregate. Like, this is just who I am. And I think there's a freeing feeling in that for the person. And probably there's a freeing feeling in that for God's Spirit to work, because you've let go of some stuff that you've been holding on to, trying to be somebody you're not. And when you can comfortably just stand in the pulpit or stand in front of people or be in a relationship with somebody and just be yourself, there's more influence in that than there is anything else. I mean, and I think there's something to be said about that. And back to my shoe struggle and different things like that, like letting go of some of that crap and just being okay with just being like, this is who I am. You can like it or you don't have to like it. If you like it, great. If you don't, sorry, this is just me. And I'm going to wear my shoes and be okay with it. I might tuck my shirt in. I might not. I might wear a coat. I might not. But like,
that's all right. I had to tuck my shirt in yesterday. Don't worry about
August the 3rd, this is where we freed Chase.
I'm saying
from some of those things that were vexing him.
Yeah. It's just shoes, man.
I'm telling you.
It's just style.
But I do. I mean, I think that is certainly something that is evident. And
that man gonna have a heart attack.
Now I want to go back, because I'm sure just about every sermon that Charles Spurgeon ever preached is like in a library somewhere. Yeah, I don't have time to go back and read all of them, but Claude does. So we can just check with Claude and see if what his language was like compared to the language of the day, and if he would have been considered a Mark Driscoll of his time.
That's interesting.
Well, the difficult thing about it is, because there's a couple more things that come to mind for me, like on Chase's point about being able to be yourself as a leader, specifically, you know, in the role of the pulpit and communicating weekly. Like, I do think there's a freeing aspect for the leader to not have to, I don't know if conform is the right word, but fit into a box. And I also don't mean to say or sound like, oh, us poor guys in ministry, we've got it so hard. Look at all the things that we have to do to make sure we're accommodating and that you can hear the gospel from us. But would you, as a congregant, a congregation member, would you be more concerned about what your pastor's wearing to make you happy and comfortable? Like, would you be more concerned with that than the fact that in some ways your pastor's living, this sounds more serious than it is, but living a lie to be somebody that he's not in order to communicate to you? Does that make sense? Like, I would think that the pastor being able to be himself and not have to fit into a box would be more important to you. But
it should be, but we also have to understand that not everybody's on that same, not everybody's that far along yet. But no, to your point, I agree for sure.
Some people, on the other hand, their conflict may be, you know, the pastor looks a certain way this way, so that maybe not be for me, and maybe their trade-off is, you know, things that sound good but might not be biblically true, you know? And so you have the flip side of that as well, of some who are like, you know, I like this place, but I don't fit. Like you mentioned about the tie, like I don't fit that. So then, you know, they may go somewhere else and, oh, well, that person, I can relate to them and maybe what they're wearing, but, you know, I'm not far enough along to understand, well, maybe they're leaving out
without watering down
some of the
gospel.
big nuggets, you know?
Yeah. Well, you know, we learned last week that I believe you've made yourself available for chapel. Is that right?
Oh, you did? Let's go. Why did y'all text me that? What the heck?
Yeah, you weren't here.
Well, because I didn't want to, and I actually said this on the show last week, I didn't want you to be mad and rat mouth me that I've told you no multiple times, but I told Andrea yes.
There you go.
It doesn't matter to me.
Oh, hey. Well, look at
I
that.
mean, that just means you'll have some prep for if I need you in the spring. I'll give you till the spring.
So that was side point, but main point, you're going to craft something if you have that opportunity that would be different than what you would craft for if you spoke to a college group or something like that. Your language will be different. Your approach will be a little bit different, even though you're still going to be you. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what Chase was alluding to about Ed Newton and Josh, to the extent that he's been able to see him. They appear to be themselves, even though based on who they are speaking to, they may craft their messages a little bit differently based on who they're preaching to. I think that's fine. But, the caution that I had in Josh's words here was that you don't want to have a license to go out and say something shocking for the purpose of stirring up pastor world.
Yeah.
To let that be the primary thing. You're trying to reach people with the gospel. Not only, and he talks about reaching people where they're at, but again, we don't want people to stay where they're at.
Yeah.
We want people to continue to mature in the faith all the way through. So I think we've all used the phrase fine line. It is a fine line. You have to be careful about that.
The other thing I was going to say is, and this might get us into a wider discussion about the medium of podcasting and being on the internet and all that. So we have to be careful. But I also kind of just wish he would have been a little bit more specific.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I understand you're trying to make a point about, and it's probably coming from a very good place, being that, like, I mean, when Andrea was on here, she talked about, the growth that Lake Point is experiencing, and they can probably speak to that because Matthew and Andrea were actually members at Lake Point when they were in Texas. This was pre-Josh Howerton, but they are experiencing like explosive growth, as is Ed Newton. And so this is probably something he's dealing with and he's having to learn from. Mm-hmm. And I would even guess that he's had this type of person that he's talking about come to Lake Point, schedule a meeting with him. And I mean, we're just making stuff up, but it's conceivable that somebody is like, I can't relate to you. And so he's trying to work through that. And then he's got a platform and he's talking about, hey, this is what I'm seeing. Pastors, we got to correct this if we want to communicate the message of the gospel in the 21st century. But like, be more specific, because then we've spent 48 minutes talking about something that we don't know for sure that he really meant. And the reason that I say that this opens up another discussion is like, this is basically all of the podcast world is like,
drop a quote, open-ended.
One podcaster says something and then another one spends,
an hour or more
talking about it. And I am in a very, 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 very weird place about that, because I don't ever want to participate in that. Like I have this app on my phone that called Readwise that like when you can save highlights and stuff when you read an article, and then like every day it'll send you like, 5 things to review. And so the other day, one of the reviews was like an article from, I don't know, 22 or 23 about how podcast could be a way to, I don't know how the guy worded it, but basically save the ministry of the church in some form or fashion because of this idea that we've talked about before, that a lot of people won't listen to a sermon, won't come to a service, but they will be exposed to a church through a podcast like The Journey. And he was talking about the long form conversational benefits and stuff like that. And at that time, I really agreed with that, and I agree with it to an extent now, but there's also a part of me that thinks there are podcasts doing more harm than good to the church right now. There's some that are, it's just, I know that's a can of worms, but I think,
But you would also say, though, that there are churches doing more harm than good.
Oh,
well, yeah, but I mean, I say,
I didn't know your middle name was Paul.
what are you talking about?
Wasn't Paul? Didn't he talk about some of them churches?
Well,
Well, I think
I've got more thoughts on that, but y'all pick it up and run with it however you want to.
whether we actually nailed exactly what Josh was thinking or not, I think that's secondary. I think we've still had a very good discussion about being authentic in the pulpit and trying to do your dead level best to reach as many people as you can while being yourself. Like Chase said, being set aside, but being relatable at the same time. And the fine line that exists there, we may not have gotten exactly into what Josh meant when he said what he said, but that doesn't mean that we haven't used this medium for benefit, if that makes sense. And, even if we didn't get what he said exactly right. Does that make you feel any better?
In regards to Josh Howerton, because I like Josh Howerton. But the bigger conversation about the podcast is, I don't feel any better about that right now, especially when I read 2 Timothy. Do y'all want to go further with that or no?
What do you read?
Well, 1 and 2 Timothy are probably my two favorite books of the Bible. I don't know why. They've always seemed very practical to somebody in ministry. And so I just find myself coming back to them over and over again. And when I was mentioning earlier about how Paul talks to Timothy about, he gives all these examples, but then he's like, but you, Timothy, are a man of God, and therefore you need to be different. But on the podcasting front and just the world of content topic in general, 2 Timothy 2, this is verse 23, Paul says, again, I say, don't get involved in foolish, ignorant arguments that only start fights. A servant of the Lord must not quarrel, but must be kind to everyone, be able to teach, and be patient with difficult people. Gently instruct those who oppose the truth. Perhaps God will change those people's hearts, and they will learn the truth. Then they will come to their senses and escape the devil's trap, for they have been held captive by him to do whatever he wants. And then going on into chapter 3, he talks about the dangers of the last days. I'm trying to figure out how much I want to read. He says in chapter 3, verse 2, for people will love only themselves and their money. They will be boastful and proud, scoffing at God, disobedient to their parents, and ungrateful. They will consider nothing sacred. They will be unloving and unforgiving. They will slander others and have no self-control. They will be cruel and hate what is good. They will betray their friends, be reckless, be puffed up with pride, and love pleasure rather than God. They will act religious, but they will reject the power that could make them godly. Stay away from people like that. They are the kind who work their way into people's homes and win the confidence of vulnerable women who are burdened with the guilt of sin and controlled by various desires. And then he actually names names. But I just think that I'm like, when he starts out by saying, don't get involved in foolish and ignorant arguments that only start fights, I'm like, this is, like I said, this is so much of what the podcast world does. And it's just a constant cycle.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes back to the fine line phrase we've been talking about. Paul, my favorite chapter of the Bible is the 17th chapter of Acts. So Paul jumps right up there in the middle of all these philosophers who have all these things to say about life and how the world should be and why the world is the way that it is. And he walks up there and says, yeah, I'll be happy to engage any and all of you right now, because here's what I have to say about that. And you can respond to that however you want to. And Acts 17 says some were persuaded and some weren't. So I think you just have to be very cautious in how you approach your words. I don't know this for sure. I haven't done a deep dive, but I think there's a lot more in the Bible about the brevity and the refraining of speech than there is about the volume. And here we are saying 10,000 words in an hour-long podcast.
Yeah, like you read Proverbs, and it talks about discretion in what you say and words healing and harming, and then you're like, well, there's an entire industry just for talking.
Yep.
I just think it's a good example of, I don't know the best way to articulate this. It's been rolling around in my head for months, but it's a good example of how things that can be used for good, for ministry, like we are also in our sinful nature still extremely susceptible to the harmful effects of it. Earlier, Paul talks about people being in love with money and doing things that will whatever will get them money. And then that's when he says, but you, Timothy, are a man of God, so run from all these evil things. Pursue righteousness and a godly life, along with faith, love, perseverance, and gentleness. Fight the good fight for the true faith. But see, some people take that as like, oh, I got to fight. And so their content is nothing but fighting, which is antithetical to the way of Jesus. And so then some people would get into, well, okay, well, that's why Scripture contradicts itself, because you got Jesus that didn't do this, but then you've got the New Testament letters where Paul can be harsh.
You mentioned the word industry, and I think that's to me, in a lot of ways, the key to, the struggle, whether it be podcast or even back to the quote that we've been talking about the whole this podcast. When you're industry focused, you're focused on what can I say to gain traction. And even in a preaching context or even a relational context, if you're focused on the industry, it's again about what am I getting out of this? What are people going to do for me? How do people like me? Versus like the opposite of that, would be serving, ministry focused, that type of thing, where it's like, I'm just here to serve and help, people and, be obedient to and faithful to what the Lord's leading us to. And so to me, that's the gap that right there. And I think it goes to the quote too, because, there's a struggle. Like if you're industry focused as a preacher, you are thinking about what you're saying so that other preachers would say, man, this guy's on top of it.
Attaboy. Let's invite him.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird to me when you're around a bunch of pastors. I don't mean that in the wrong way, but like going to the convention, okay? Back to the convention. Like, I don't know, like it's just an interesting dynamic. And like when you walk into a meeting like that, you can see it to me and sense it. Oh, everybody's right now trying to make sure they all look like they are, like a pastor or in charge. I don't know, but I think it's the same way in the business world. I mean, I don't know that for sure, but I've heard stories from friends when they show up to certain meetings, it's like everything's got to be buttoned up and everybody looks the same and talks the same. And it's like this whole weird dynamic, so, but that's an industry focused versus a ministry focus. And I think that's the difference between kind of what we've been talking about a little bit and what you're talking about here and what people are doing podcasts and with their words. Industry focus is the clickbait mentality. And that's just what you're trying to do.
Okay. You feel like we exhausted your topic?
I think so. I think we had some good conversation. Hopefully people will find it beneficial.
I'm exhausted.
Were you exhausted before you came in here?
Yeah, for other reasons.
Okay. Well, we'll work on getting Josh on to explain himself.
That would be awesome.
I really like him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just it. You have to agree with everything or what, but yeah, I do. I like him too.
Well, and again, like to the industry part of the conversation, like Josh is the one that has an episode with Sean Ryan coming out today, and millions of people are going to hear.
Why? Probably right to his quote here. Yeah. There's people that he wants to reach.
Yeah, and you got to be careful with that kind of argument, because the hardliners would say, well, Joel Osteen has a lot of people coming to his church.
Right.
That doesn't mean
right.
And I don't know about y'all, but like, I've never met a single person in my generation that has been captured by Joel Osteen whatsoever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't want to say he's a non-factor anymore because I wouldn't say that, but
to a certain demographic,
I know
he would.
Well,
Exactly.
and it's back to the industry thing. That is
An industry plant? Is that what you're saying?
no, it's that's an example of medium.
Yeah.
He had a television ministry, and that's why he was very popular with a certain generation.
Right.
Whereas I'm sure Lake Point has a television ministry, but they're really good at the internet stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. You got any comments to read? Or any comments from yourself?
There's multiple comments in the comment section. No giveaways today. Sorry. So Grant's episode that came out. Let's see. This was episode 75, which again, 75 boys.
I listened to like the first 20 minutes so far.
What'd you think?
I enjoyed it so far. I was falling asleep though.
Okay.
Trying to take my Sunday afternoon
think that's a
nap,
good
so
review.
I had to stop it.
We have 3 people. Looks like Austin Martin, Pop, and Mark Johnson are all in for a live episode. So just putting that out there.
How do you feel about a live episode? You weren't here when we brought that up, I don't think.
I'm usually pretty decent off the cuff.
I agree.
There's Miss Rita Bailey.
I think it would be fun to do a live episode and have like people in the crowd bring up something. You just
That's what we would have to
Q&A.
do. The way it
Q&A.
came up was we were talking about the 100th episode. And
I heard. I think that was the part I heard thus far.
before you fell asleep.
No, I paused it and then I fell asleep.
We'd have to do it on the stage and have a live audience.
We could do it in the fellowship hall. We could do it in my middle school preteen meeting room. It would work out.
All right, continue with the comments.
Anyways, Miss Rita Bailey just mentioned she saw my shoes and she just wanted me to know they didn't distract her. So thank you, Miss Rita, for the confirmation on my shoes there. And then let's see here. That's all that I have.
worst case, Chase, just stick to neutral colors.
That's all that was said from that episode. So
Good deal.
All right. Well, another good episode. Hopefully, the audience will be the judge of that. But
I talked to a new listener yesterday.
Who?
He's been. I can't reveal all that.
wow,
Can't reveal all that. But he's really been enjoying it. He said I think he said he's quit watching TV, so that's like this is now his like guilty pleasure. But he enjoys it so far. But he's not through with it, but he's catching up.
I'm looking forward to you watching Wyatt's episode.
Yes.
Wyatt's episode.
Absolutely.
I didn't know y'all
you need
did
to watch
one
it
with him.
all the way through.
Was he asleep?
No, but he did tell the story.
Oh my goodness.
He did. He had a couple impressions of you because we told him, you're sitting in Auburn's chair, so you're going to have to act as if Auburn would act.
Yeah.
And Roxton mentioned Sweet A Coffee at the beginning of the episode, so he told that story too. So
Sweet A Coffee.
yeah, you'll have to listen.
Dang.
yeah, it
All
was
right.
a good episode.
It was good.
When is that post?
This week,
Oh.
right, Neil?
Yeah.
Yeah, Wyatt's is this week, and then Smith and Kaylee.
All right.
So
It's been 4 it's 4 episodes without Auburn, so Auburn's back now.
Back at it.
all right. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.